Have you ever wondered why certain emotional wounds refuse to fade, no matter how much time passes or how strong you try to be? There are moments when the heart feels heavier than the body can carry, when memories rise uninvited, and when fear disguises itself as strength. And yet, in the middle of this silent battle, Psalm 27 speaks with a clarity that feels almost supernatural. It asks you one simple question: if the Lord is your light and your salvation, why should fear still govern the key? Deepest places of your soul, this scripture does more than comfort. It confronts, it reaches into the hidden layers of your emotional pain, the wounds you tried to bury, and the fears you stopped admitting even to yourself. When you declare Psalm 27 every morning, something powerful happens inside you. The words begin to dismantle the inner narratives built by past experiences. They challenge the lies that rejection taught you, the insecurity that disappointment carved into your identity, and the shadows left by unanswered prayers. This psalm becomes a shield, not just against external enemies, but against the emotional patterns that silently sabotage your peace. It reminds you that God does not heal by removing the storm, but by standing with you inside it. And when you let these verses settle into your heart, they begin to heal what no human affirmation ever could. Some wounds are not visible, yet they shape how you love, how you trust, how you see yourself, and how you interpret every silent moment of your life. Psalm 27 was written for the soul that feels hunted by fears that have no face, by memories that refuse to release their grip, by emotional noise that grows louder in the quiet of the morning. Declaring it transforms the atmosphere around you, but more importantly, it transforms the atmosphere within you. And if you have ever felt like your heart was carrying more than it was designed to hold, then this psalm is not just encouragement, it is a lifeline. So, before you move forward, pause for a moment and ask yourself, have you carried emotional wounds alone for longer than you were meant to? Because what you are about to discover may surprise you. And as these truths begin to unfold, take a second to share your experience in the comments. Let others know how this message speaks to your heart. And do not forget to like this video and check if you are already subscribed, because understanding these revelations is part of your healing journey as we move deeper into what truly shapes your emotional world. What many people never realize is that emotional wounds rarely disappear on their own. They settle quietly beneath the surface, shaping the way you move through life without ever asking for permission. You may think you have left the past behind, yet the past has a way of leaving fingerprints on your present, influencing your reactions, your expectations, and even the way you interpret the intentions of others. Pain does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers through hesitation, through sudden insecurity, through the heaviness that rises at unexpected moments. And this is why Psalm 27 resonates so deeply. It speaks to the part of you that feels tired but keeps pushing, the part that wants to heal but does not know where to begin. There are wounds that come from betrayal, from rejection, from feeling unseen, unheard, or unworthy. These wounds often remain long after the event itself has faded. They show up in the way you protect yourself, in the walls you build, and in the quiet fear that history will repeat itself. Emotional pain has a way of teaching you to expect disappointment even in peaceful seasons, creating an inner tension between what you hope for and what you fear will happen. But when you bring that hidden pain into the light of Psalm 27, something begins to shift. The psalm invites you to acknowledge what has been buried too long, not to relive the pain, but to free yourself from its quiet control. Many people walk through life convinced they are simply cautious or careful, when in truth they are wounded. And because the heart remembers what the mind tries to forget, these wounds become silent architects of behavior. They influence your ability to trust, the depth of your relationships, and even the confidence with which you step into new seasons. But Psalm 27 breaks that silence. When you speak its words aloud, you confront the fears that once went unchallenged. You remind your soul that you are not abandoned, that you are not navigating this healing journey alone, and that the presence of God is stronger than any memory that has tried to define you. What weighs the most is not always what happened, but what you told yourself about what happened. Maybe you decided you were not enough. Maybe you decided you were too hard to love. Maybe you believed that every good moment would eventually slip away. These narratives take root early, and without intervention, they shape entire chapters of a life. But the voice of Psalm 27 interrupts those narratives with truth that is steady, grounding, and uncompromising. You begin to realize that healing is not about pretending the pain never existed. It is about refusing to let it dictate who you are becoming. And as these layers start to unfold within you, the journey continues, revealing why certain struggles feel heavier and why the heart holds on to things it was never meant to carry alone, preparing you to face the truths that rise when fear tries to govern your inner world. There comes a point in every emotional journey when fear begins to reveal its true shape. Sometimes it looks like hesitation, other times like distrust, and in many moments it disguises itself as strength, as if being guarded were the same as being healed. But deep beneath those layers, fear is often a response to a wound that was never acknowledged. You can tell yourself you have moved on, that the past no longer influences your present, yet your reactions reveal a different truth. Fear surfaces in the way your heart tightens before new opportunities, in the voice that questions whether good things can last, in the suspicion that rises even when no threat exists. And this is where the depth of Psalm 27 begins to meet you in ways you did not expect. Fear grows in the shadows of the heart, often in the very places you avoid exploring. It hides behind the memory of relationships that failed, moments of abandonment, words spoken in anger, and experiences that shook your sense of safety. These emotional fragments create invisible patterns that follow you quietly. You begin anticipating disappointment before it arrives. You brace for loss, even in seasons of blessing. You prepare for rejection without realizing how much your heart longs to be fully seen and fully safe. Psalm 27 confronts this internal battle by reminding you that the Lord is the stronghold of your life, not your defenses, not your logic, not your attempts to stay in control. It invites you to see that much of what you call caution is actually fear whispering that you are still unprotected. As you reflect on these words each morning, the psalm begins exposing the fears you have normalized. It shines light on the beliefs that shape your emotional reactions, revealing that the heart often listens more to past wounds than to present truth. You might notice how quickly you expect things to go wrong, how easily you imagine worst outcomes, how naturally your mind drifts toward disappointment even before it has a chance to occur. These are not personality traits. They are emotional imprints left by experiences that carried more weight than your heart could hold at the time. And yet, Psalm 27 offers a counter-voice, steady and unwavering, calling you back to a foundation that fear cannot shake. There is a reason why fear feels powerful. It learned to protect you when no one else did. It learned to interpret silence as danger, distance as rejection, uncertainty as threat. But what once served as survival eventually becomes a prison. Fear keeps you from trusting what God is trying to bring into your life. It keeps you from stepping into healing, from believing that peace can be real, from embracing the possibility that your future does not have to look like your past. And so, when Psalm 27 challenges fear, it is not simply offering comfort. It is offering liberation. It is showing you that the love of God is not an idea meant to soothe you, but a presence meant to anchor you, even in your most vulnerable moments. And as this truth begins to settle into the deeper places within you, a new layer of understanding emerges, preparing you to face how divine light enters emotional darkness, and why healing often begins exactly where fear once had the strongest voice. When emotional darkness settles over the heart, it rarely announces itself with dramatic moments. It appears quietly, in the slow fading of hope, in the heaviness that lingers when you wake, in the sense that something inside you has dimmed without explanation. Many people walk through life convinced that this darkness means they have failed, that they are spiritually weak, or that God has somehow stepped back from their story. But Psalm 27 reveals something profoundly different. It reminds you that the light of God is not a distant concept, but a living presence, designed to pierce through the shadows that emotional wounds create. The psalm does not ignore your pain, nor minimize your struggle. Instead, it meets you at the exact depth where darkness once felt louder than truth. Every time you declare this psalm, you invite a shift in your internal world. The words become like a lamp, uncovering corners of the heart you stopped examining. They help you see where discouragement settled in unnoticed and where fear convinced you to shrink your expectations. This divine light does not expose you to condemn you. It exposes you to free you. It reveals the emotional clutter, the assumptions about yourself, and the memories that still echo louder than God's promises. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the light begins to soften the weight inside you. Not by erasing the past, but by showing you that the past no longer has the authority to define who you are becoming. Darkness survives through agreement, through the quiet acceptance that things will always be the same, that healing is too far away, that change may not be possible for someone like you. But the moment you speak the truth of Psalm 27, you break that agreement. You allow your heart to remember that the Lord is not just a helper in crisis, but the source of illumination that reveals the way forward when your emotions cannot guide you. You begin to understand that what felt like abandonment was often simply the absence of clarity, and that clarity returns when the light of God's presence becomes the lens through which you interpret your pain. There is something powerful about realizing that darkness no longer has the final word. Fear loses its grip when you recognize that God is not asking you to heal yourself, but to walk with the one who sees every wound with perfect understanding. Emotional shadows fade, not because you force them away, but because divine light makes them unnecessary. And when you allow that light to settle into the quiet spaces of your heart, you start to feel strength rising again, not the strength of pretending, but the strength of being held by a presence greater than your pain. This is the moment when healing begins to take shape within you, preparing you for deeper layers of restoration that unfold as the journey continues. If this part of the message is speaking to something inside you, share in the comments what resonated most, so your voice becomes part of the healing God is awakening in you. Healing emotional wounds is rarely a linear process. It is more like uncovering layers that have been building quietly over the years, each one shaped by experiences you handled the best way you could at the time. Psalm 27 speaks directly into this inner landscape because it does not approach healing as a moment, but as a journey of restoration, guided by a divine presence that understands every fracture in your heart. When you declare its words each morning, they challenge the belief that healing depends solely on your own strength. Instead, they draw your attention to the one who restores you from the inside out, slowly replacing the emotional patterns that once governed your reactions. Many people believe healing means forgetting what happened, but the heart does not work that way. Forgotten moments still influence your behavior. Buried memories still shape your responses. Avoided pain still finds its way into your voice, your decisions, and your self-perception. Psalm 27 does not ask you to pretend the wounds never existed. It asks you to acknowledge that God remains present even in the places where you once felt abandoned. The verse that says, "Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me," is not merely a poetic line. It is a declaration that every form of human disappointment can be met with a divine embrace strong enough to steady you again. As you begin to internalize this truth, the healing process becomes less about erasing pain and more about reframing it. You start to recognize how certain emotions, the sudden heaviness in your chest or the tightening in your thoughts, do not appear randomly, but arise from unresolved moments within you. These moments do not define your identity, but they do ask to be transformed. And transformation begins when you allow Scripture to become the lens through which you view your past. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who endured too much, you begin seeing yourself as someone God is actively restoring. Your story is no longer framed by what wounded you, but by the presence that is now walking you out of those wounds. Healing also requires patience with yourself. Some days will feel lighter than others. There will be moments when you feel strong and grounded, and others when the same old feelings rise unexpectedly, making you question whether progress is even real. Yet the psalm reminds you that the Lord is your stronghold, not your fleeting emotions. It assures you that emotional restoration is rooted in divine consistency, not in your ability to remain unshaken. This is why declaring Psalm 27 every morning is so powerful. It trains your heart to return to truth before fear, before memory, and before the echoes of old wounds attempt to regain control. As this process unfolds within you, something begins to shift. You start noticing strength where there used to be hesitation, clarity where confusion once ruled, and a sense of grounding that does not depend on circumstances. And this prepares your heart to face the deeper inner conflicts that emerge when God begins revealing the hidden structures within your emotional patterns, leading you into the next stage of healing. There comes a moment in every healing journey when God begins to uncover what lies beneath the surface, revealing emotional structures that have shaped your reactions for years. These are patterns you did not choose consciously, yet they influence the way you love, the way you trust, and the way you interpret life. Psalm 27 becomes especially powerful in this stage because it does not simply offer comfort. It reveals truth, it brings clarity to places where confusion once lived, and it exposes the silent agreements your heart made in moments of pain, agreements that quietly shaped your beliefs about yourself, about others, and even about God. When the psalm declares that God is your stronghold, it challenges every inner fortress built from fear, disappointment, and self-protection. Sometimes God allows certain emotional battles not to punish you, but to show you what has remained hidden. He reveals why certain fears come back, why specific memories still carry weight, why your heart reacts quickly to things that seem small on the surface. The truth is that emotional wounds often create internal structures, like walls meant to guard you, but those same walls can keep you from receiving the healing you long for. Psalm 27 begins to dismantle these walls by reminding you of who stands with you inside every moment of vulnerability. It exposes the belief that you must face life alone, replacing it with the assurance that the Lord Himself upholds you. Many of the conflicts you face internally are not signs of weakness, but signs that God is gently removing what no longer serves your future. He shows you fears that were inherited through past experiences, expectations shaped by disappointment, and behaviors forged in moments when you felt unprotected. These inner structures once helped you survive, but survival is not the same as healing. When the psalm invites you to seek the face of God, it is inviting you into deeper introspection, a willingness to face truths you avoided for years, truths that must surface in order for transformation to begin. The emotional turbulence you sometimes feel during this process is not proof that you are breaking down. It is proof that old foundations are being replaced. The heart often holds onto patterns long after they have served their purpose. Psalm 27 interrupts those patterns with divine reassurance, shifting your perspective from self-defense to spiritual grounding. You begin noticing how God uses these moments of conflict to strengthen your discernment, refine your identity, and correct beliefs that were formed in pain instead of truth. It is in this stage that you realize healing is not only about comfort, it is about reconstruction. As this reconstruction unfolds, you start seeing parts of yourself you did not understand before. You begin recognizing how God uses emotional tension to bring clarity, how He uses discomfort to bring revelation, and how everything inside you is slowly realigning with the light that has been speaking through every verse of the psalm. And this prepares your heart to enter the next phase, where inner strength begins to rise and courage takes shape in ways you never expected. As God continues to heal the deeper layers within you, something begins to awaken, a quiet, steady courage that does not come from personality or self-confidence, but from a renewed sense of spiritual identity. Psalm 27 speaks directly into this awakening when it calls you to take heart and wait on the Lord. This is not passive waiting. It is the kind of inner readiness that forms when fear is no longer the loudest voice inside you. Courage, in this context, is not the absence of pain, but the willingness to keep walking even when the remnants of old wounds still try to surface. It is a strength born from knowing that God is not only guiding you, but reshaping you from within. This courage develops slowly, almost silently. You begin to notice that situations which once overwhelmed you no longer hold the same power. Emotional storms that once sent you into panic now meet a different response. Instead of collapsing into old patterns, you find yourself grounded, centered, able to breathe through moments that previously triggered deep insecurity. This is not accidental growth. It is the fruit of the psalm taking root in your heart. When you declare each morning that the Lord is your light, your salvation, and your stronghold, you're not merely reciting words. You are training your heart to rely on divine stability rather than emotional turbulence. Many people confuse courage with fearlessness, but true biblical courage coexists with vulnerability. It acknowledges the existence of fear, but refuses to let fear govern your steps. Psalm 27 teaches this balance. It invites you to live from a place where your confidence no longer depends on external circumstances or past experiences. Instead, it flows from the unchanging presence of God. This shift allows you to confront emotional triggers without fear of collapsing back into old cycles. It empowers you to view challenges not as threats, but as invitations to grow. As courage begins to rise in your life, you also notice how it reshapes your internal dialogue. Negative thoughts lose their authority. Old narratives lose their grip. The heart becomes more receptive to truth and less responsive to fear. This transformation does not erase your history, but it reframes it in the light of what God is building within you. You start to understand that courage is not something you force. It is something God awakens as He heals the places where fear once made its home. And as you embrace this strengthened inner posture, you become more prepared for the deeper restoration that waits in the next stages of your healing journey. If this awakening of courage resonates with what you are experiencing, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice might encourage someone walking through the same silent battle. There are chapters in every life marked by loss, rejection, or painful memories that settle into the heart more deeply than words can express. These experiences do not simply fade over time. They shape the way you interpret love, the way you respond to distance, the way you guard yourself from disappointment. Psalm 27 enters this difficult territory with the gentle authority of truth, reminding you that even when people walk away, Even when seasons collapse, even when your heart has been pushed beyond what you believed it could bear, God remains the grounding presence that reorganizes what was shattered. This psalm does not deny the existence of pain. Instead, it acknowledges that emotional wounds can alter the structure of your inner world, and it offers a divine framework strong enough to rebuild what was broken. Painful memories often become reference points for future decisions. Without realizing it, you may measure new relationships through the lens of old hurt, or interpret silence as rejection because once silence preceded abandonment. You may carry an internal worry that good things will not last because in the past they didn't. These emotional echoes shape how you move through life, sometimes leading you to hold back, to question your worth, or to expect disappointment even when nothing is wrong. Psalm 27 allows you to face these buried emotions without fear, offering a truth that is not influenced by your past. It speaks of a God who receives you fully, who sees the weight you carry, and who knows the hidden meanings behind every hesitation and every guarded emotion. When you allow the words of this psalm to settle into those sensitive places, a slow reordering begins. You start to understand that your identity is not defined by who left, by what failed, or by moments when you felt unseen. Instead, your identity becomes anchored in the unwavering presence of the one who has never abandoned you. This shift does not erase the past, but it removes the power the past once held. You begin to interpret emotional triggers differently. You start recognizing when a reaction belongs to an old wound rather than to the present moment. And in that recognition, space opens for healing that had been waiting for years. The psalm also brings clarity to the complexity of grief and rejection. It reminds you that God does not allow these experiences to diminish you, but to reveal the depth of who you can become through His restoration. When you look at your life through this lens, you begin to see that even painful seasons carried seeds of refinement. You realize that what once felt like devastation created room for courage, discernment, and spiritual maturity to emerge. And slowly, the memories that once felt heavy begin to lose their emotional weight, not because you forced yourself to forget them, but because their influence is replaced by a deeper awareness of God's sustaining presence. As this reorganization happens within you, you move into a new emotional posture, one that allows trust to grow again, one that makes space for new beginnings, and one that prepares your heart for the stability and restoration that Psalm 27 continues to unfold in the journey ahead. As healing progresses, something subtle but profoundly important begins to happen inside you, the restoration of trust. Not the fragile trust that depends on circumstance or reassurance from others, but a deeper trust that forms when your heart finally recognizes that God is not unpredictable, unstable, or distant. Psalm 27 speaks directly to this restoration when it reminds you to remain confident even when circumstances seem uncertain. Emotional wounds often distort your perception of stability. When you have been disappointed repeatedly, your heart learns to brace for the next collapse. When you have faced abandonment or betrayal, your mind becomes conditioned to expect disruption. And yet the psalm builds a new internal foundation by grounding your emotional life in the constancy of God's presence rather than in the unpredictability of human experience. As the psalm becomes part of your daily declaration, you begin to notice small changes in the way you respond to emotional triggers. Situations that once awakened immediate fear now meet a quieter, more grounded version of you. Instead of assuming the worst, you pause. Instead of preparing for rejection, you consider the possibility of peace. Instead of listening to the echo of old wounds, you start listening for the steady voice of truth. This shift is not accidental. It emerges because the psalm is slowly teaching your heart a new pattern, one built on spiritual security rather than emotional instability. You begin to realize that trust is not about ignoring what you have been through. It is about learning that your history no longer dictates your future. Many people struggle to believe in stability because they have lived through too many sudden changes, but healing allows you to reinterpret those memories. You begin to see that moments of collapse did not destroy you, that seasons of loss did not define you, and that the presence of God remained even when everything else shifted. This recognition rebuilds confidence from the inside out. It helps you understand that your emotional anchors must be placed in something unchanging. Psalm 27 offers that unchanging foundation, a place where your heart can rest even when uncertainty tries to rise again. As trust is restored, new clarity arrives. You begin noticing when your reactions are fueled by fear instead of truth. You recognize when you are assuming hurt instead of observing reality. The heart becomes more discerning, able to separate the past from the present and the present from the fears it once carried. This renewed stability does not make you immune to emotional challenges, but it gives you the strength to navigate them without collapsing into old patterns. You start to feel grounded in a way you haven't felt in years, anchored not by circumstances, but by the quiet assurance that God is guiding your steps, even when you cannot see the full path. And as this grounding deepens, your heart becomes prepared for the final stage of the journey, where restoration moves from internal healing to a renewed sense of purpose, allowing you to envision a future shaped not by wounds, but by divine direction and emotional wholeness. As the journey through Psalm 27 unfolds, something profound begins to emerge within you. What once felt fragile now carries a quiet stability. What once echoed with fear now resonates with a deeper understanding of who walks beside you. Healing is rarely about returning to who you were before the wounds. It is about becoming someone stronger, more grounded, more aware of the presence that has been holding you even in silence. When you declare this psalm each morning, you are not simply repeating ancient words. You are aligning yourself with a truth that redefines the emotional landscape of your life. You begin to see that the courage you have been developing, the clarity rising within you, and the strength that now anchors your heart are not accidental. They are the fruit of a process God has been guiding with precision and tenderness. This transformation reshapes the way you see yourself. The unresolved memories that once carried so much weight begin to lose their hold. The fears that once dictated your choices no longer speak with the same authority. You start to recognize that the presence of God has been gently leading you through every internal shift, teaching you to navigate emotional storms with a steadier heart. Psalm 27 becomes more than a declaration. It becomes the framework through which you rebuild your identity, not around your wounds, but around the truth of who you are becoming. Each verse reinforces the reality that healing does not erase your history, but it does empower you to rise above it. You begin noticing subtle changes in the way you approach relationships, decisions, and moments of vulnerability. Instead of reacting from old patterns, you respond from a place of greater grounding. Instead of assuming loss, you consider possibility. Instead of shrinking back when uncertainty presents itself, you step forward with a quiet confidence born from spiritual restoration. These shifts may seem small at first, but they accumulate, creating a new emotional posture that supports the life God is preparing you to walk into. The psalm teaches you that waiting on the Lord is not a pause in your journey, but an active strengthening of your heart, preparing you for what comes next. As you continue declaring these words day after day, your heart becomes more aligned with truth than with fear, more anchored in divine stability than in emotional unpredictability. you begin to understand that healing is not an ending, but an unfolding. And as this chapter of restoration settles within you, there is a sense that more is still ahead, more clarity, more purpose, more layers of strength waiting to be revealed as you walk with the one who has carried you through every hidden battle. If this message stayed with you until the end, share a comment saying this message was for me, so your voice becomes part of this moment. And if these words have helped you in any way, consider liking the video and subscribing, not out of obligation, but because this journey of healing continues and there is more to grow into together. There is a video here that deepens this same path, so let your heart keep moving forward and continue with me there.